Dr. Stephen Jackson is the outgoing UN resident coordinator in Kenya. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Mariam.
Good
Lovely
morning.
to be here again. Thank you.
Good to have you here again. As you're doing your round.
Yes.
As you're saying
The
goodbye
farewells, the
to that's the farewell. This, we have called it the exit interview. Right? So it's taking stock of what you were sent here to do, whether you've done it, and whether you'd like to ever see you here again.
Absolutely. Good question.
But Mariam is going to give you the day's quotes.
All right, I'll share the quote. You know the drill. And then you can say if it speaks to you or not. Today, it's a quote by Hannah Arendt, an American historian and philosopher. You're familiar, I can see. She said very simply that the most radical revolutionary will become a conservative the day after the revolution. The most radical revolutionary will become a conservative the day after the revolution.
It definitely speaks to me. Actually, in Ireland, after our revolution in 1916, one of the revolutionaries said, "We were amongst the most conservative revolutionaries in the history of the world." So I'm afraid that often happens. I hope I haven't lost my radical edge, even though I'm a bureaucrat and a bit of a stuffed shirt. But you know, talking about the disorder in the world, I think you probably need to do a show called Fixing the World. The nation right now may need some fixing. Seems to me to be in better shape than the world.
Oh, wow.
All together,
You think
right?
so?
All together, don't you think?
Oh.
Many things are happening.
Yeah, there's a lot.
What's causing all this shake-up in the world from your lens?
Well, I think you're right to say that that there has been, in some quarters of the world, a questioning about the global rules-based order. But I'm very careful to say only in some parts of the world. Kenya still believes in an international rules-based order and doesn't
Do
flout it.
we?
You do in an international rules-based order.
Thank
You do.
Yep.
Yeah,
You do.
true.
You contribute to it. I think there are many parts of what we used to call the global south that still believe in it. It's my part of the world where some countries are expressing cynicism and disbelief about it.
Yeah.
I still think that the global rules-based order will survive, but it's certainly under threat.
Is it a reckoning of realizing that essentially the disparity has existed for a long time, and how the rules-based order is applied, it hasn't been consistent. So is this a moment of reckoning where we figure out exactly, are we applying this to everybody or to nobody?
Yes, it's a moment of revelation of that, isn't it? I mean, as if we didn't know it before, right? I think a country like Kenya, with its history of having been colonized, with its history of having had to progress its development largely on its own, though, you know, with international support. But so I think to a country like Kenya, the unequal nature of that has always been clear. But I think it's becoming very clear in other parts of the world now as well.
You know, what's really interesting about this is the fact that the people who, quote unquote, wrote the rules are breaking the rules. Right? And the people who are expected to follow the rules are following the rules and wondering, wait a minute, I thought we said that this is the rule.
Right.
Now you're breaking it. So is it about time that then the South writes the rules?
Do you remember, and I think we discussed it on a previous time I was on the show, Ambassador Martin Kimani, your ambassador in the Security Council, speaking the day after the start of the war in Ukraine. And I'm paraphrasing Martin, he said it much more eloquently than I'm going to remember to do now, but he said, okay, you want me to say that this is a violation of the United Nations Charter? I'll say it, Kenya will say it, it's a violation of the UN Charter. But he said, only slightly more diplomatically than I will, he said, but you all do it. You all do it.
Yeah.
Every single day. Let's come back now into the country and your tenure here. How long has it been?
5 years this time.
You've been in the country for 5 years.
5 years.
As a resident coordinator. For people who didn't follow our last interview, let's just by defining. Who is the UN resident coordinator and what's your job?
So the UN resident coordinator coordinates the actions of 25 or more UN agencies, funds and programs in Kenya, working for Kenya.
Right.
So that's that alphabet soup, going from Food and Agriculture Organization, that's the first one in the alphabet, all the way to the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, at the other end of the alphabet, and 25 or more of those in between. All of them working on these 17 SDGs that are represented by this circular badge here. And it's my job to try and make the sum greater than its parts. But trying to get them to work together and move in the same direction and support Kenya's government and people.
Okay. So by doing that, they should be serving the interest of the country.
Correct.
Of Kenya.
Correct.
So it means that, first of all, you all need to know what does Kenya want.
Correct.
So that then all these alphabet entities,
Soup.
the 25 of them, the alphabet soup,
Move in that direction.
move in that same direction.
Yeah.
So what's your job in getting the brief from the government?
Getting the brief from the government. So fortunately, that's reasonably clear, right? On the one hand, Kenya not only is, a signatory, as it were, to the Sustainable Development Goals, but you remember Kenya and Ireland, my home country, were the two countries that actually led the process. Ambassador Macharia Kamau from Kenya, Martin Kimani's predecessor. So Kenya's signed up to the SDGs. So we know that that's the overarching roadmap. And then within that, of course, successive governments come forward with their plans. And in the case of this government, it's the BETA and it's the medium-term plan number 4. So that gives us our kind of roadmap.
Okay, so you operate from that point of view. I like that you've started with the fact that, then the successive governments come in with their plans. A big problem that we have is essentially that we never feed into things, right? So we'll have this big roadmap, we'll have Vision 2030 that will be started by Mwai Kibaki, but then someone else is like, I don't know, I kind of want something quicker, or shorter,
shortcut,
and things like that. What challenges does that pose for the implementation of the SDGs, essentially?
I hear what you're saying, but actually, and genuinely, Kenya's rather unusual. I can't think of many countries where Vision 2030, that was negotiated 2 administrations ago, right, and almost 20 years ago, would remain for successive governments as the kind of the lodestar.
Right.
Like in my country, an incoming government just throws out the previous
everything.
everything. So again, I don't want to exaggerate, but actually the task's a bit easier in Kenya because there has been a sort of a long-term continuity to the development plan, and I think that's because to some extent, everybody knows what are the priorities.
Yes.
Jobs, and where are the jobs going to come from? They have to come from the main economic sectors: agriculture, tourism, industry, services.
And tech now.
Yeah, exactly, the digital. So there's, in a sense, limited scope to deviate from that, I think.
Okay. So it doesn't feel like that on the ground, I'll be honest. It feels like with every successive government, but I do get what you mean in the sense that when it's the overarching, goals and these 17 SDGs, there does seem to be a push towards that. Even look at, the push for universal health care, housing, all of those do fall within that remit.
And those have remained constant, actually, not the means of getting there necessarily, the Shah is new and so forth, but they have remained constant as priorities. They were priorities for the Kenyatta administration as well. But now, of course, we're talking about plans and aspirations. Delivery is another matter.
It's the implementation of it.
Yeah.
What role should the UN, I'm not saying should, not does, what role should the UN play in, for example, working in Kenya, in working with government and communities to the realization of the people's aspirations?
Well, you've given me the answer in the question, right? If we were in a failed state, and we're not, if we were in a failed state, then the UN has a very front foot role in operations. It even ends up in some countries that have been torn apart by war, in a sense, operating as the Ministry for Health or the Ministry for Education. That's not the case here. You have strong institutions. Are they as strong as they could be? No. I'm not sure they are anywhere in the world. But so we work to support those. And so if I tell you, for example, that we have helped to see that 17 million kids were vaccinated against typhoid, one of the big killers, right? So
it's amazing.
We did, right?
It's amazing.
But that's with the Ministry of Health, right? And that's with the Ministries of Health at the county level as well, right? So we're always in support. We might be helping to provide those vaccines or helping to ensure the standards through which they're administered, but the government is in the front line of delivery. And similarly for, results that I could boast you about in the education sector or in agriculture, they're always in partnership, at least with Kenyan government, probably sometimes with the private sector, with civil society, depending on exactly what we're doing.
And I love that you went that direction because I wanted you to give yourself a scorecard. I know you're not supposed to mark your own homework, but yeah, your hits and misses as UN resident
Am I
coordinator.
marking me or am I marking the UN?
Let's
You-
do you first.
Because I'm always my own worst critic.
Yeah.
I look back at 5 years and I'd give myself a B minus, a B minus.
Okay.
I think there's more that I could and should have done. Happy to go into why that is.
Yeah.
For the UN in Kenya, they're going to have to forgive me, my friends from the UN country team. I'd give us something like an A minus. I wouldn't give us an A plus. I always think that there is more that we could do. And I can give you a very concrete for instance. So on the one hand, I'm very proud that, one of the things the UN is known for is humanitarian support. So
Yes.
we've talked about it before. We had a huge drought between 2021 and 2023.
Yeah.
And we're back into drought now. Between 2021 and 2023, we mobilized about, let me do the sums, about 35 billion bob. And we believe with our partners, we were able to help about 6 million Kenyans with life-saving support. That's great. But what we weren't able to do was to get Kenya much further in terms of being drought-proof.
Yep.
Right, which is really what we should be doing. Now, there's lots of reasons why we haven't been able to win that battle. Climate change is getting more intense, so it's almost as though you're running the race and somebody's taking the finish line further away from you the whole
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
That's one reason. Another is that when money is short, and we talked about this before, money, international aid is getting shorter and
Yeah.
shorter. When it's short, you prioritize saving the lives now over proofing the society for later.
Yeah.
Right? But that bugs me.
It does.
That bugs me. That's a failure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a collective failure, but I could have advocated harder to say, come on, guys, if we just provided water in the Asal counties rather than food,
You wouldn't need to provide food
we
long
wouldn't
term.
need to provide food long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't been able to win that argument. So that's a failure. That's a miss.
It's not okay, just a miss perhaps on your part, because
No.
I hear what you're saying. You could have advocated harder, but it's essentially a critique of the entire United Nations and how it operates.
And of the international order,
Yes.
and of government, and
Yes.
of society.
Yeah.
So it's a structural miss, but I want to put my hand up. That's something I would like to have been able to do more on. I mean, now, I can boast that we have one of our flagship programs in Kenya is a joint program on water, brings several of those UN entities together. We've been able to, doing the maths in my head again, because it's always in dollars, so I have to do it in bob, about 2.5 billion bob from the Global Climate Adaptation Fund that is going now to bring durable water in a sustainable way to 1 million more Kenyans
Yeah.
living in drought-prone areas over the coming years. But that's
How
1
so?
million. How are we going to do it?
Yeah.
It's very low tech actually. There's a very interesting technology called a sand dam.
Yeah.
Yeah? I don't know if you've come across those, Mariam.
I haven't.
Eric's nodding.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm just like is it what the name suggests?
It's what the name suggests. You can go and see one in Makueni, actually. Or not just one, many. Makueni is one of the counties that's really made inroads with this. Basically, you go to a seasonal riverbed, right? And you just see all of these rocks, right? And so
Right.
then when the rains come, it floods and you've got a river. You build a dam, a low dam across the seasonal riverbed. Now, normally, your enemy, when you're building a regular dam, you don't want the sand, the silt, to build up on this side of the dam, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that stops you. You do want the sand and the silt to build up in this. So the water comes, it washes the sand down, and basically when the sand dam is working, what you'll see is just a sort of a flat plane to the dam, and then you see the rocks here.
Okay.
And this flat plane is wet sand, and it's like a battery. It holds the water, and then you draw it off when you need it. It's incredible technology.
Okay.
Costs very little to build, about 3 million bob per
dam.
sand dam. And then you've got water when you need it.
Amazing.
Yeah, so sand dams, but also water pans, rehabilitating boreholes. It's all low-tech stuff.
I can see. I don't know how I've not come across one, considering Makueni's.
You actually have seen them.
Yeah.
Oh, I
that
just
Yes, you may
didn't
not have
know.
realized that
Yeah.
that's what they were.
Okay, Yeah. okay.
They're really worth going and having a look. But this is all part of having, I think, because of climate change, moving Kenya away from rain-fed agriculture
Yes.
to irrigation agriculture. That's what we've got to do.
Yeah.
Government knows that. Government is very wedded to the idea, but it does cost money, because even
does.
3 million bob per sand dam, you think of how many you've got to build, it builds up. So we're working on that as UN Kenya, and that's sort of one
so
example.
that's a plus.
Yeah.
That's a good thing that you've done in terms of that project, the longevity of the project. The humanitarian response at that time of the drought was a good thing. The downside was, no long-lasting
No
program.
long-lasting, yeah.
What else? What else would you say is
So another one I'm
not
very...
scoring you an A minus?
Another one that I am proud of, or another couple I am proud of, and then we'll do, the misses. I'm very proud of the fact that we're helping Kenya to move up the ladder of school feeding. School feeding is something so basic, but it's so essential. We had it in Ireland when I was growing up. It keeps kids healthy. It keeps kids in school. When drought comes, it's a lifeline, and on the regular, it's just improving scores across all of the metrics, right?
Sure.
So right now, actually, when we started the effort, Kenya was already feeding about 2.4 million kids with regular school meals. The ambition is to get to 10 million by 2030, which is essentially all the kids that really need it.
Yeah.
And I think through the support that we're giving, but under the leadership of the government, we're already at about 3.4 million. So we've added nearly another million to that tally. And by the way, that also puts money in the pockets of farmers. So everybody wins.
I look back at, let's just look through that. So school feeding, it's there, it's a government policy, to keep children in school, we shall ensure that there is a meal, okay? That is being danced with at Ministry of Education and at the counties. So counties are doing this and they're saying, so we are feeding the children at ECD, and some going to primary like Nairobi and Mombasa and I think others. And then others, the school feeding budgets being reduced at the national level, right? So I look back at that, I'm like, okay, so
How do these two things
how do
coexist?
these two things coexist?
Yes,
but we're
exactly.
reducing the budget for school feeding, and then we are saying that, we have a school feeding program at county level and all. How does that work? So how is the UN then plugging in? Are you supporting the government at budget level? Is it budgetary support for school feeding? Or are you working with communities and NGOs to do this?
It's more the latter. At the moment, but we are also lobbying hard to try to protect the expenditure in the budget at national and county levels for this. Because, you're pointing to the obvious, which is that long term, it has to be something that is on the regular in the budgets. But to get from the starting point of 2.4 million to 10 million, that's a big lift. And so there is this kind of transitional moment, I think, where there is a role for international partners to come in. But it's also ultimately going to be about business. One very big, powerful country in the global north, I won't name who that is, their representative at the Global School Meals Coalition, which met here 2 years ago. President Ruto addressed it. The head of the World Food Programme was here. This person said to me, do you know why it survives in my country? It survives, school feeding survives through left-wing governments, right-wing governments for 40 years. It's because it's not in the Department of Education, it's in the Department of Agriculture, because it's big business for farmers.
Right.
They have regular contracts year on year to produce the food that the schools need.
Right.
So everybody wins, and then it becomes this sacred cow in the national budget that nobody touches, right?
Love that.
So that's the trick.
An economic incentive. Who knew?
Who knew?
Who knew?
Right? That's something as basic as school feeding, right?
It works very, very well. And also, by the way, because maybe in that economy, it's structured such a big agriculture is big.
There you go.
In Kenya,
I think you've possibly identified
big
which country I'm
agriculture
talking
is
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with smallholder farming and all, it just becomes a completely fragmented issue.
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution would be for us. Because again, if you look at NGOs they're not NGOs, it's like social enterprises, like Food for Education, doing very well with their
Fabulous. Well, where is it?
Yeah.
Kitchens,
Super
central kitchens, but that still you're looking for the incentive.
For the farmers or for everybody in the ecosystem?
In that ecosystem.
She's doing it essentially, it started as, a charitable
Yeah.
move. Everyone in the ecosystem, however, is economically incentivized. If you're
That's right.
supplying the food, if you're working for Food for Education or for county, dish in a county, you're providing the tap-tap bands
tap-tap
and
badge.
all of that.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My fear is that the people who are benefiting are not strong enough voices, because they're fragmented.
Well, that's right, because
the-
the farm lobby
Yeah.
in the country that we were talking about is super powerful,
Yeah.
right? Which sort of goes to the broader point that, I know agriculture, for some Kenyans, that sounds like Kenya's past, right? And Kenya's future is digital. Well, Kenya's future is digital. I want to get on to talking about that. But Kenya's future is also agribusiness. I remember saying on this show before that I go into the supermarket in Ireland and the vegetables I buy are from Kenya,
here, yeah.
right? That's great. But where I'm going next, right? I'm on my way to become resident coordinator in China. I'm not sure that Kenyan vegetables are being sold in China in a big way.
Not yet.
But they should be.
But you'll find our avocados there shortly.
Yeah.
Avocados are, yes,
As you land there, in fact, carry some.
Is that right? I should bring them with? Yeah. I get into trouble at customs. But the point being, I mean,
Yes.
Ireland is a market of 4 million people.
China?
1.4 billion, right? So agribusiness, and that means, as you say, getting everybody organized. I wanted to say a little word about digital, because I've been talking about
Pause on that.
Oh, pause.
Yeah.
Go
Because
ahead.
we're going to take a break at 28 minutes after 7. We are having the exit interview with Dr. Stephen Jackson, the outgoing UN resident coordinator in Kenya. He is the one who's like the head boy of the 25 UN agencies in the
yep.
country. Just coordinating them is like the head prefect.
Yes.
The head
Right.
prefect. That's a very
There
good
we go.
analogy.
Just making sure that they do the job that they are here to do. And we're asking him, so what do you think you did well? What do you think you did not do well? And then we shall tell him where he failed. We'll be back shortly.
What's up, nation? This is Jeremiah Mo. I am a civic educator at Semezana Live. I use a digital platform where we host conversations for change. And today I'm fixing the nation from Juja, where we're mobilizing over 500 young people to come and register as voters. We were here yesterday on Wednesday, the 25th of March, where we had young people come in their numbers to register as voters. But it's quite unfortunate that the IBC was understaffed, that not all the young people were able to be registered. So we call on the IBC to support the initiative that young people have to Kokadi by bringing in more staff to register more young people.
Right. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. That's a wonderful, wonderful WhatsApp Nation video. And I know the lines were looking crazy, Phil, if we can just have a look. That was yesterday at the Juja IEBC office. Yeah, just a lot of young people showing up saying, Nataka kwa kadi, I want to register as a voter. 500 is not a small number to mobilize for one constituency, right? One constituency office, sorry. And there's more coming today. So please, if you are not able to go to the IEBC office in Juja yesterday, or you were able to go and you found the line was too long, or that the IEBC was understaffed, you can come back today, okay? And Jeremiah is absolutely right. The IEBC has noticed. You have realized Tukokadi is, it's got momentum, okay? So let's get the staffing numbers up. Let's make it possible for young people to register without wahala. We were talking with Eric, who said it's a cost implication, it's a time implication. So let's also be cognizant of that, of young people's time and resource. 0769590762 is our number for WhatsApp Nation. Send us yours. Kama you're in the line waiting to register as a voter, sure, just give us a little insight, involve us as you get your card and to get registered as a voter, 0769590762.
It's a beautiful thing to see them doing that. I mean,
Right?
so seeing those long queues, it's a beautiful thing to see that, people are actually going to take up the vote.
Yeah.
Now, to bring out the vote as well, I'm sure with that kind of mobilization, things are going to be big. Shaman HQ is on YouTube and says, how does the UN harmonize diverse donor priorities with Kenya's national and county development agendas while maintaining strategic coherence? Billy Drought says he'd like to give you an A. Anasema jamaa amepiga job. In fact, an A+. Kama kuna kitu kama hiyo.
Did you say that was Billy?
Yeah.
That's not my driver, is it? Sneaking one in there. Billy, if that's you, that's not.
That vote doesn't count. Spoiled votes. Spoiled votes. Robert Miner says, this is not solving any of our current problems. Education, health, floods, etc.
So I think we have contributed on education, health, floods. Have we done enough? No, we can never do enough.
Yeah.
But I would, the first thing I actually just want to pick up on Jeremiah, totally agree. That was going to be my sign-off, was to say,
Right.
Kenyans, young Kenyans, register. Please register. We say in Ireland, if you're not voting, you don't have any right to complain.
Right.
And it's fabulous to see. And Eric, we've talked about this before.
Yep.
We were very proud as UN Kenya to support the IEBC back in 2022 for what were then, I think, the most peaceful and orderly elections that Kenya has known in the democratic period. I think 2027 is going to be pivotal. And the more people register, the better for democracy it is. And the UN, we're launching our program of support to Kenya, to the IEBC, precisely to help with all of this right now.
What does that program look like?
So it's interesting. A lot of what the IEBC has requested us to support on is stuff we've discussed before here.
Yes.
It's around really the climate of belief or disbelief around that fairness, right? The IEBC's view is, look, we've got it, UN, in terms of the mechanics.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. Though I think that there are some things we can help with on, like reducing the length of the lines and things like that. But on the mechanics, we're good, they say. But it's the environment. It's that climate of mistrust and disbelief.
Yeah.
And so how can we help, and how can you in the media help reassure Kenyans and say, no, look, the election is going to be a free and a fair one. Register, believe in it, get stuck in, make your voice heard.
Right.
Right? And that's where I think collectively we all have to help. So that's going to involve everything from helping the IEBC with its public outreach and around strategic communications, but also, and this is where you guys also come in, misinformation
And disinformation.
disinformation. And emerging actually, Eric, out of conversations that you and I've had down these 5 years, I think we've been able to do some great stuff last time around, and this is one of the things I would also give myself a passing grade on. We had this great initiative called Mapema that was all about detecting hate and incitement speech early during 2022, then counterblasting messaging to correct the record on TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth, and also prosecuting, helping the institutions to prosecute politicians for that kind of nonsense when it was merited. So that Mapema platform, while I'm on digital, I mean, also,
right, because you were just there.
I was just about to go there before the break. I mean, again, I'm going to blame Eric, but emerging out of conversations that we had around the Gen Z protests and about how do you engage that youth voice. So the ZK platform that has provided an opportunity for hundreds of thousands of young Kenyans to express their point of view on matters of the day, and ZK 2.0 is going to be a big part of our support in the 2027 elections, so that people can talk about the lines are too long, or I don't think this process was fair. What can we do about it? How can we fix that? But there's other digital innovations a bit away from the politics and the human rights and democracy space. We've done some great work in the health sector. This app called Tico, I don't know if you've come across that, that allows young women between the ages of 16 and 19 to access information and then services for reproductive and sexual health. That's reached nearly 1 million young Kenyan women now.
Right, and
think that's amazing. One of the ones I'll go away feeling very, very proud about. And right now, we're also, we've got a great initiative called DigiKen, which is about basically saying, why are we using all these platforms like, okay, so instead of Amazon, we've got Jumia, right? I know last time I was on, the Jumia guy was just before me or just after me, I think, right? But why don't we have more platforms that allow e-commerce to flourish in Kenya? So we had the DigiKen initiative on that. So there's a lot that I do feel proud of, but I still wouldn't give myself an A+.
Okay.
So there are very many things that the UN and various UN agencies have done. I'm sure all of them, from Food and Agriculture Organization, there are people who will speak directly of the impact of the FAO. Maybe the issue would be, how do you communicate all that to the beneficiary communities and then also to the wider communities, you know? So that everybody knows, all right, so we have, when you talk about food and agriculture in this country, food security is a huge, huge thing.
Huge thing.
What is FAO doing, and what has the FAO done so far? Because with that information, then citizens are able to become more vigilant and to follow through with seeing things that have been started. Because I always fear that, you know, we start things and then there's no sufficient momentum to carry it through, beyond the funding. So if there is, you know, coming to an end of a program, then nothing ends. But if the people and the communities were actually aware of it, then it picks on.
It
always the
becomes
question
organic.
about donors, donor programs, donor-funded programs.
So there's three things that I feel that I haven't, and perhaps we haven't done well enough, right? Communications, sustainability, and leverage. I'll touch on each of them quickly. So comms, yeah, we're really bad at what you two are really good at, right? Communications. Now, I don't mean we have some great folks working on it in the UN, but too much of our communications is too old school.
Right.
We tend to think of doing a launch and then doing a press release, right? That's sort of 19th century. And a report that, you know, is full of
printed and
words
embossed.
and nobody reads. Just before I came on air, I saw one UN agency had published an alphabetical list of 26 words, A, B, C, D, that it was banning. So S was synergy, and T was transformational.
Oh God,
and
I'm behind that.
yeah, no, I'm all about that, and I'm trying to avoid using those words today. So, comms, we're not good at telling our story, and particularly there is a bit of a challenge where, you know, as I said, if we were in a country where it was a failed state and we were the ones doing the work, but if you're sort of supporting from behind, then what can you claim responsibility for, right? And so then that does lead a little bit to, I think, folks going, well, what do those guys sitting in Gigiri really do? Right? So comms is one. Sustainability is another.
So just before you go to the sustainability, again, it's the how you do the communications, right? Because I do see you're in a sensitive spot. Yeah, you can't claim responsibility for everything, but you are part and parcel, and you need to show your impact. So it's perhaps how you do it.
And regarding communications as conversation, not as just a one-shot deal. We did that. Here's the press release. And here's the ribbon cut.
Give us a
round of applause. You know, makofitena, and then off you go. Right.
Right.
Which sort of then pivots to the sustainability piece, right? Because, like we were talking about on school feeding, there may be this transitional moment where international partners support, but then how do we ensure that something really gets uptaken? And that goes a bit to the question that was posed, very interesting question posed by Shaman. About, you know, being pulled in multiple different directions, I think, by different government entities, different bits of government, different donors. Well, so that's supposed to be the coordinator's job, right? The clue is in the title. So
really
if it's not happening, that's my failure, not somebody else's. And then finally, leverage. So we all know that traditional aid is declining. We also know even if it was increasing, it would never have been enough. Right? Not in a country the size and the scale and the ambition of Kenya. So where's the fuel for the development motor really going to come from? It has to come from 3 or 4 places. First and foremost, domestic resources. So that means taxing wisely and spending effectively. Right? The second is from the private sector, international or domestic. The third is from the big development banks like the World Bank, the African Development Bank. And the fourth is that small number of what we call vertical funds that work on climate change, like the Green Climate Fund. Those are the only places that have got dollars in the trillions or the hundreds of billions rather than in the millions, which is what we've got. Millions of dollars sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about 60 million Kenyans, it's not.
It's really not.
It's really not. So leverage, and this is something I'm proud we've moved in that direction. So where I said to a friend yesterday, it's like you're going to cook nyama choma. You need everybody to bring logs, right, or charcoal, and then the UN just provides the matches. Right.
Who's bringing the nyama? We are it. Okay, let me hop on sustainability just a little bit. Essentially, how do we put the United Nations out of business.
Business.
Yeah.
I hope you won't put us out of business, but I do hope you will put us out of development business.
That's it. Like,
Right.
let's leave you at, like, maintenance roles.
Yeah.
Cutesy, very top level, or just checking in type things.
Yeah.
But essentially development work,
Yeah.
no need.
Well,
Because everything is all right now.
You are doing that, and thank you. If I look at the Kenya that I first knew 30 years ago, when I first worked in Nairobi as a young guy, the UN was far more front and center involved. I keep going back to this, but let me just use it as sort of the illustration. School feeding. So school feeding in Kenya actually began in 1986, and it was World Food Programme that ran it. And it was phased over to government by the early 2000s,
Okay.
right? So already, in a sense, you were starting to put us out of business. So we just need more of that. And I mean, what would I give it? How many more resident coordinators are you going to need? Well, the resident coordinator role may eventually morph into something else. It may be more of a representative, sort of diplomatic relationship. I don't know. But how many more development kind of resident coordinators do you need? Maybe, what are you going to need? Another 15 years, do you think?
Maybe I can't
20?
tell. What I can't tell from a numbers in terms of like time perspective. What I can tell from a numbers perspective, because USAID and the pullout and the loss of this massive amount of aid that was coming into the country, did this, right?
Right.
So
Triggered some alternative thinking.
Some alternative thinking, and there's already stopgaps happening. But the hope is that we stop doing stopgaps and start moving towards funding our healthcare system fully, right? So that was born out of a need.
Out of a need.
Essentially. So I'm like, it's not necessarily when, it's how much less do we get for us to be able to
Yeah, it is. There is a sense in which the aid relationship is a bit of a dependent one, and so weaning yourself off that progressively, right? But you could also think of it, just as when we're younger in our lives, we need more support than we do when we're, older.
True.
And Kenya's older now. Kenya's a very old society, but in terms of your development trajectory, like I said, it's been extraordinary over the 30, actually 40 years since I first came here as a student in 1986.
When was it for the World Food Program?
No, that was literally as a backpacker.
Okay, just exploring the world.
Got the bus up from Moshi. I was in Tanzania, came up to have a look, and that changed my life, genuinely. That
Were you
was what
staying
made
at
me-
like the YMCA backpacking 100%?
Do you know where I stayed?
Where did you stay?
In a tenement on River Road.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
We made the mistake, there were four of us. We made the mistake of saying to the taxi driver, we need to stay somewhere cheap. Yeah. We kind of meant cheap for a Mzungu.
Yeah.
And he took us to...
To mean cheap, yeah.
I seem to remember that it was something like 10 bob for the room.
10 bob.
But it was 100 bob for the padlock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was memorable. But that was where I stayed.
10 bob for the room, 100 for the padlock.
Something like that.
Fantastic. 1986 Kenya sounds amazing.
I mean, I'm making fun of it. I shouldn't. But the true story is that bus, it dropped me off. So Moshi, I loved Tanzania, but it looked like the Africa I was expecting. It was villages and it was, agricultural and rural. And then the bus dropped me off in front of, I didn't know what it was then, but it was KICC. And I'd never seen a skyscraper before. Didn't have any in Ireland. Wow. So it blew my mind that, expecting to see desert and zebra and I don't know what other nonsense prejudices I had. And instead of which, already 40 years ago, this was a cosmopolitan global center.
Right.
And you could see where it was headed.
Yep.
Right? And that was what made me want to do this job.
Love it.
Love it. I want to touch a bit on human rights. One of the offices that you're coordinating in Kenya is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Correct.
That has an office in Kenya. Now, people expect somehow that the UN body would champion human rights and be very vocal against human rights violations in the country. Do you feel that in the 5 years you've been here, the UN and the UN Human Rights Office in Nairobi has actually been that vocal?
Very fair question. First of all, actually, that office is new. We've only had it for about a year and a half now. And it was with the explicit consent and desire of the government, which I think is a positive sign. Yeah. Prior to that, we did have human rights officers here, but it wasn't a full freestanding office. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's a little bit the answer that I gave before on school feeding or education, whatever. We're there to support the institutions, right, in a country like Kenya. If we were in a place that had no institutions, then we would be on the front line. You happen to mention the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Now, Clarice Oganga, Madam Chair, is a former staffer of mine. She worked for the UN on human rights for, I think, 15 years, Clarice. She's fantastic. She deserves everybody's support. I think the Commission's doing really valiant work. And that's the kind of institution that we try to support. So it ordinarily wouldn't be for us in a country like Kenya to be as vocal directly, as you put it. But we have been, and the High Commissioner himself has been at moments that really call for that, like at the moment of the protests. So if you look back, you'll see that he did speak out. And we tend to have that done from Geneva by the most senior folks.
Is it loud enough?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
I think we do a delicate dance. Let me be honest, anywhere in the world, we have a delicate dance to do where we have to, on the one hand, stand up for what's right, and we try to do that. But we also have to retain the relationship with the institutions that are doing that work and not substitute for them or, indeed, get ourselves cancelled or thrown out or whatever. A lot of the work that we do is a bit behind the scenes, really pushing with the institutions, with IPOA, with the police authorities, and so on and so forth. And I think that on average is the more effective way for the UN to do it in a country like Kenya. But I accept that exposes us to criticism, and that's not unreasonable.
Right, because I think mentally the UN is seen as a custodian, right, of this multilateral order of human rights, essentially. So then in a place where you have such a huge presence, the biggest presence on the continent, one of the biggest in the world, right? And then to see blatant human rights violations, and then to see the custodian and the prefect kind of be not quiet, but not as loud as you would want them.
Yes.
Yeah, you can see where, and I do understand that a lot of the work is behind the scenes, and it was going to be my next question, actually. Are there things that you worked on that were perhaps not visible, that you are proud of, that you can speak about now? But if there's still something to be said about the visibility of the United Nations when it comes to matters human rights, especially in Kenya, given the large presence, and it's about to get even larger.
Even larger.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one thing we said the last time I was on the show is that if we only had presences in countries that had perfect human rights records, we would be nowhere. Right?
Yes.
I'll just say that for the record. In terms of things that I can say now that I wouldn't have said before, even there, I want to be a little bit prudent, but you were talking earlier about the compensation for the victims of 2023. I will say that we've been pressing very hard behind the scenes for accountability and compensation. And it was interesting, Eric, you asking the question, like, who's on that list, who's not on that list. That's 2023, but what about 2024? What about 2025?
2017.
I just was about to say, let's go back also to the previous administrations. And we're continuing to press. So I hope you will take me at my word that we are continuing to press. But I would also say it goes back to the sustainability point. Long term, what will change things in any country, and certainly for Kenya, is when the national institutions are the ones who are winning this, right? The courts, right?
True.
Not when it's coming from the outside. And sometimes when the push for change is coming from the outside, that can even have an adverse impact. They're trying to teach us lessons again, right?
Yeah, fair.
In fact, Billy he had given you the A. He says, under Stephen's leadership, the UN in Kenya won the best 2024 UN country results. That's worldwide. Hey, really must work for you.
I think this is my driver. I'm
Other
gonna
than
talk
that,
to him.
as a young Gen Z, is your driver Gen Z?
He's a young man.
Ah.
I think we're starting to out him here.
As a young Gen Z, we are proud of him calling out on the injustices that were done,
Okay.
that were visited on Kenyans. Then as we conclude, because we've got just a short while, the support for the youth in terms of registration, you said you were working with the IEBC, but how about the youth themselves?
Yeah.
In organizing, in mobilizing, in being active, in not just being active in protesting, but also being active in holding the government to account by electing an accountable government.
So that's where registering and voting comes in. It's where ZK, this platform that we've talked about before, comes in, that allows youth to have their voice. Unitalk is another platform that we have that does that. But I thought you were going to ask me about jobs, and that's where I also don't think we've done enough. Now, the UN isn't really big enough, even with all of the resources that we have, to try to engender jobs for 35 million. But that's where this leverage comes in.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, more than anything, what youth really need. Like, we've got 1 million and more young Kenyans coming onto the job market every year. So how are we collectively, government, international partners, going to solve that one? And there, I give myself a failing grade on that one. I don't think we've done enough.
What do you think should happen?
It's a very unsexy answer. Agriculture. Agriculture.
So what's your brief like to your successor, the UN Resident Coordinator
Quite like
Office?
that,
What are you
yeah.
telling them to do?
So he's a great guy, Gary Conneal. I hope you'll have him on. Former Prime Minister of Haiti, but a long-time UN civil servant, resident coordinator in Burundi, Niger, and Jamaica previously. Really great guy. You'll love him. I'm saying to him, keep working on these questions of communications, sustainability, and scale. Keep working for the youth. Help Kenya get through the 2027 elections peacefully, orderly, and whatever government comes, we work with and we support them, and work yourself out of a job. We are doing that. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
What's next for Dr. Stephen Jackson? You mentioned China.
Resident coordinator, China.
Yes.
Yeah, so a very, very different setting.
Same alphabet?
No, very different alphabet. I've learnt my name in Chinese. It's Jie Sehong.
Jay Sahan.
Jie Sehong.
Jay Sahan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sehong.
Okay.
Good luck with that. No, it's going to be utterly fascinating. Look, China and Africa are massive partners already. China and Kenya, massive partners already. One of the things I really want to work on is continuing to bolster that relationship from a development perspective. And I'm also interested, in this moment when we all know multilateralism is in question globally, I want to hear what the Chinese have to say about that and how I can help with that.
All right, in 30 seconds, what next for Stephen the man?
Stephen the man? Well, packing up, getting ready to go, and then that will be my last post with the UN, and I'll retire back to Ireland there. But I will never leave Kenya. I'll have to come back here. This has a huge place in my heart. As I've said, I've known it for 40 years on and off. It has influenced my worldview enormously, and so I'm afraid you'll see me again.
We'd love to see you again.
I'd love it.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Stephen Jackson. He is the outgoing UN resident coordinator. And of course, he's been talking to us about his tenure, his hits, his misses, in our view, and his as well. But a job well done. Thank you so much for spending the morning with us. And we hope to see you back soon, even when you're in China. It's
Come
just
to China
a
and do
little
a
flight.
show from there.
Actually, yes, we would love to.
Yeah.
We would love to.
That'd be brilliant.
All right. Hashtag is Fixing the Nation and TV. We'll be right back after this.